I still remember the exact moment my knees nearly gave out. It was a Tuesday morning in Owensboro, Kentucky. The air smelled faintly of rain. And I had just finished folding laundry in my small brick house when I picked up the phone to call my son Mason. I wanted to ask a simple question. One any mother asks with pride and anticipation. When is the wedding? Instead, my daughter-in-law Lila answered. She was sitting in my living room, her legs crossed comfortably on the sofa I had bought for them last winter. She looked me right in the eye, gave a chilling little smile, and said words that hit me harder than a fall down the stairs. We got married yesterday. We only invited special people. Special people. The phrase rang in my ears like a bell announcing I wasn't one of them. For 3 years I had quietly sent Mason and Lila $500 every month for rent. I stocked their fridge when work was slow, paid for a used washer, and even bought the pale pink dress Lila had pointed out in a shop window because I wanted her to feel like a princess on her big day. That dress now hung useless in my closet, tag still attached. I had also tucked away $1,000 in an envelope as a wedding gift, thinking I would hand it to them after the ceremony. Now there would be no photos with me in them. No proud smile from a mother standing beside her son. When I checked social media later, the truth cut even deeper. Lila's parents were there, beaming beside the bride and groom. Her siblings toasted with champagne in a rented hall in Bowling Green. There was even a tiered cake I recognized. Because last month I had given Lila $800 for personal expenses she never explained. Mason couldn't even look at me when Lila delivered her cruel little performance. His voice sounded rehearsed when he finally muttered, "Mom." It was small. Just us and 2 witnesses. But I already knew it was a lie. The photos told the real story. I went to bed that night with the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. I thought of all the times I had skipped buying myself new shoes. All the weekends I stayed home from church luncheons to save a few extra dollars, money that had gone straight to them. Exactly 1 week later, my phone rang again. This time Lila's voice was not smug. It was trembling. Desperate. "Ruth. The rent is overdue. The landlord says if we don't pay this week, he'll kick us out. You forgot to make the transfer." I sat very still, staring out my kitchen window at the spring magnolia blooming in the yard. My voice came out calm. Almost too calm. "Lila," I said. "Didn't I tell you? I only help special people." The silence that followed was deeper than any I'd ever heard. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one left trembling. The morning after that call, I brewed a strong pot of coffee and spread my bank statements across the kitchen table. For years that table had been a command center for their emergencies. Rent late. Write a check. Car battery died. Withdraw cash. Groceries low. Swipe my card. But now, for the first time, those papers were for me. I added the numbers with a careful hand. $18,000 in rent over 3 years. Groceries close to $7,000. Furniture. Appliances. Small loans that were never paid back. All of it totaled more than $33,000. $33,000 I had drained from the savings my late husband Robert left so I could have a secure retirement. I folded the statements neatly and made my way to the bank. The manager, Shreya Patel, had known me for years. She raised her eyebrows when I asked to cancel every automatic transfer. "Are you sure, Mrs. Whitaker?" she asked softly. "More sure than I've been about anything," I told her. Shreya added extra protections. No online transfers without in-person ID. Alerts for any login attempts. And a freeze on joint access. For the first time in years, I walked out of that bank lighter. My money was finally mine again. That afternoon I drove straight to a locksmith in Henderson. A man named Trevor came out and replaced every lock on my house. The clinking of new metal in my hands felt like chains breaking. Tomorrow, his son Milo would install a security system with cameras. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. But Mason and Lila were faster than I expected. By early evening, I heard footsteps in my yard. When I opened the door, they weren't alone. A tall man in a tailored suit spread papers across my dining table as if he owned it. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said smoothly. "I'm attorney Victor Caldwell. Mason and Lila are concerned about you. They'd like you to sign a temporary power of attorney. Just until you're feeling better." I gathered my bank papers and tucked them under my arm. "These are private. You have no right to be looking at them," I said. Mason's voice turned pleading. "Mom, we're worried. You've been acting strange. This is just to help manage things." But I saw the hunger behind his eyes. It wasn't worry. It was desperation. "Out of my house," I said, pointing at the door. "All of you." They left with the stiff dignity of people unused to being told no. My hands trembled as I locked the door behind them. But my chest was steady. I knew I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. An hour later, my neighbor Hattie Cole knocked. She was holding a casserole dish, her silver hair pulled into a bun. I heard voices. She said gently, "You all right?" I nodded. For the first time, I told someone everything. Hattie listened without judgment, then said the words I didn't know I needed. "You are not crazy, Ruth. You are finally free." 2 days later, the phone started ringing from numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored the first few. But by the fifth call curiosity won. I picked up and heard Lila's voice. Sugar sweet. Trying to sound like the girl next door. "Ruth. Please don't hang up. Mason and I feel terrible. We rushed things. We want to make it up to you. How about we have a special dinner? Just us three. We'll cook at your house. Like old times." I almost laughed. The same woman who had told me I wasn't a special person now wanted to celebrate in my kitchen. "Lila," I asked calmly, "how much rent do you owe?" Silence. Then a stammer. 2 months. About 1,000. "But this isn't about that, it's always about that," I said. And ended the call. The next morning, Milo from the locksmith shop arrived with boxes of equipment. He and his partner wired cameras to my front door, driveway, and back porch. They showed me how to view everything on my phone. For the first time in months, I felt a layer of protection between me and the chaos Mason and Lila carried like baggage. I started keeping a spiral notebook by the kitchen window. Every time Mason's old sedan rolled slowly past the house, I wrote down the date, the time, and even the weather. Within a week, I had filled 4 pages. They circled like hawks that had lost their prey. That Sunday I drove to the cemetery outside Philpott where Robert was buried. I had been avoiding the place because every visit stirred guilt. Guilt that I'd squandered the security he left me on people who treated me like an ATM. I knelt by his headstone, brushed away the weeds, and whispered. I thought I was buying their love. I thought if I gave enough, Mason would see me. I was wrong. The wind shifted, cool against my cheek, like an answer I had been too blind to hear. But Mason and Lila weren't done. The very next week, a knock came at the door. A woman in a county badge stood on my porch. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm Angela Jameson from Senior Services. We received a complaint that you may be at risk. Could I come in and talk with you?" My stomach dropped. They had gone there. They had tried to paint me as incompetent. "I'd like to call my attorney before I answer anything," I said firmly. Within 20 minutes, Daniel Porter arrived, briefcase in hand, his expression sharp as a blade. He asked to see Angela's paperwork, then calmly explained the history of harassment, the financial exploitation, the attempted power of attorney scheme. He laid out my bank records, my clean bills, and the security footage of Mason circling my property. Angela listened, flipping through her forms. When she finally looked at me, her tone softened. Mrs. Whitaker, from what I see, you're managing just fine. I'll close this case. When the door shut behind her, Daniel said quietly, they're escalating. Next step is guardianship. A chill passed through me. But instead of fear, I felt a spark of something stronger. They wanted a war. I was ready. The letter arrived in a thick envelope stamped with the county court seal. My hands trembled as I slid the papers out. But the words steadied me fast enough. Petition for guardianship of Ruth Whitaker. Petitioners: Mason Whitaker and Lila Carter. They were really doing it. My own son was asking a judge to strip me of my right to manage my life. To hand him control of every dollar I had left. Attorney Daniel Porter read the document slowly, his jaw tightening. They've got witness statements attached, he said, flipping through the file. 3 of them. The first was from a neighbor, Drew Pruitt, who lived across the street. He complained I'd been acting erratic, installing cameras, yelling in my yard, and having strangers over at odd hours. Strangers, my quilting neighbor Hattie and the locksmith's son. The second statement made my chest ache. It was signed by my pharmacist, Sean O'Neill. He supposedly claimed I had irregular medication habits and refused to take prescribed medicine. I had no prescriptions. Only vitamins and the occasional aspirin for arthritis. The third was from Lila herself. Pages of melodrama, written in a neat looping hand. She claimed I had sudden mood swings, confusion about dates, and paranoid episodes. She painted me as a lonely old woman under the influence of outsiders. Daniel exhaled hard. This is textbook manipulation. We need to confront each witness. We drove first to the pharmacy. Sean looked startled to see me. His cheeks turned red when Daniel asked about the statement. Mrs. Whitaker. I didn't know it was for court. He stammered. Lila came in weeks ago. Worried about you. She asked if I could confirm your medication history. I told her you only bought vitamins. Nothing else. She handed me a form. Said it was for insurance. I just signed without reading carefully. Daniel leaned forward. You'll sign a new statement. Under oath. Correcting this. Today. Sean nodded vigorously. Of course. I am so sorry. Next. We tried Drew Pruitt. He opened his door with a scowl. What do you want? Daniel kept his tone formal. Mr. Pruitt. You wrote that my client yells and acts unstable. Could you describe specific incidents? Drew crossed his arms. She put up cameras like this is Fort Knox. Cars come and go all day. She shouts at her family in the street. Do you know why she installed cameras? Daniel pressed. She said it was to protect herself. But to me that's crazy. I spoke quietly. Drew. Your driveway isn't the only thing in this neighborhood. Those strangers are my friends. The yelling. That was me asking my son and daughter-in-law to leave after they brought a lawyer into my house uninvited. He smirked. See. Sounds unbalanced to me. Daniel pulled me back to the car. He won't budge. But we don't need him. One unreliable witness can be dismantled and cross. Finally. Daniel scheduled a full capacity evaluation with Drive. Rachel Monroe. a respected geriatric psychologist in Lexington. For 2 hours she tested my memory, reasoning, and financial understanding. When she was done, her verdict was crisp. Mrs. Whitaker, you are sharper than most 50-year-olds I see. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a copy of her signed report. Mason and Lila had built their case on lies and twisted perceptions. I would fight them with truth. Daniel came by the next morning with a legal pad under his arm. We need a complete financial record, he said, pulling out his pen. Every dollar you've given Mason and Lila. I fetched the box I had kept for years, stuffed with receipts, bank slips, and handwritten notes. We spread them across my dining table. Daniel calculated while I read aloud. Rent transfers, $500 a month for 36 months. That's $18,000. Groceries. At least $200 a month, $7,000. Give or take. Furniture. Washer. Repairs. The used car battery. The air conditioner, $4,200. Medical emergencies, Lila's dental visit. Mason's sprained ankle, $1,100. And the $1,000 I saved in an envelope as their wedding gift. I whispered. Daniel tapped his calculator. $33,400. Documented. I stared at the neat columns of numbers. Years of sacrifice reduced to ink on paper. That ledger was both my shame and my shield. While Daniel packed the documents, I got a phone alert. Someone had tried to reset the password on my old checking account. The bank had blocked it and flagged the attempt. The location. A Wi-Fi network in Lila's sister's neighborhood. Daniel's eyes narrowed. That's attempted unauthorized access. We'll file a report. That afternoon we walked into the Henderson police station. The officer on duty, Sergeant Wilcox, listened carefully. Daniel laid out the alert logs. If my client hadn't added safeguards, her account could have been emptied, he said. Wilcox filed the incident and promised to forward it to cybercrime. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, you did the right thing. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. Later that evening, I scrolled through recordings on my new doorbell camera. My hand froze when I heard familiar voices. Lila and her sister, standing on my porch the week before the wedding. Lila laughed, her voice light and cutting. Only special people get in the photos. The rest can watch online. Hearing it recorded made my chest ache. But it was also proof of intent. Proof of exclusion. Proof of cruelty. I saved the clip and emailed it to Daniel immediately. He called back within minutes. Exhibit C, he said firmly. That audio might tip the balance in court. The next day Daniel drafted a no-contact letter. From now on, all communication had to go through his office. He also requested a temporary protective order, citing the account breach and the repeated intrusions. While we waited for hearings, Hattie came over with quilting supplies. She showed me how to piece scraps of fabric into patterns. When you stitch the past together, you take control of it, she said, sliding a square under my needle. My hands were shaky at first, but as I pushed the thread through, a strange peace settled in. For years, I had been unraveling my life for others. Now, stitch by stitch, I was making something of my own. The courthouse in Owensboro smelled of old wood and polished floors. My shoes echoed on the steps as I walked beside Attorney Daniel Porter. I wore a dark navy suit I hadn't touched since Robert's funeral. My hands were cold, but my eyes felt sharp. Inside, Mason sat stiffly in a suit that looked borrowed. Lila wore black, as if mourning something. Maybe the death of her control. Their lawyer, Victor Caldwell, greeted us with a smug nod. his briefcase heavy with papers. Judge Albright entered. A man with white hair and steady eyes. "We are here to determine the guardianship petition of Ruth Whitaker," he said. Caldwell stood first. "Your Honor, my clients are deeply concerned. Mrs. Whitaker has shown signs of mental decline, paranoia, erratic spending, social isolation. She is vulnerable to outside influence. We only seek to protect her." I gripped the edge of the table. Protect. That word, twisted, had become their weapon. They called Lila as their first witness. She dabbed at her eyes, her voice quivering like a practiced violin. "Ruth has changed. She shuts us out. Yells at us in the street. She spends money strangely and refuses to take advice. It breaks our hearts." Daniel rose for cross-examination. "Mrs. Carter, when was the last time you called my client for anything other than money?" Lila blinked. We talk all the time." "A date? Please." She stammered. "I don't recall." "Is it true you told Mrs. Whitaker she wasn't a special person when she asked about your wedding?" Her cheeks flushed. "That was taken out of context." Daniel clicked a remote. The courtroom speakers played my doorbell recording. Lila's own laughter filled the room. "Only special people get in the photos." A murmur rippled through the benches. Lila's face hardened. Next came Drew Pruitt, my neighbor. He crossed his arms like he was testifying against a lifelong enemy. "She put cameras everywhere. Cars show up at all hours. She's paranoid." Daniel leaned closer. "Do you know why she installed cameras?" "She said her son kept breaking in." "Did you witness her confused or unable to manage her home?" "No. But it's strange behavior." Daniel nodded calmly. "Strange is not incompetence, Mr. Pruitt." Then Caldwell referenced the pharmacist's earlier note. But Daniel called Sean O'Neill. Sean's voice shook as he explained how Lila misled him into signing a form he thought was for insurance. "Mrs. Whitaker buys vitamins. She manages her health fine," he said, looking me in the eye. Finally, Daniel presented Drive. Rachel Monroe. She held up her evaluation. Mrs. Whitaker scored above average in every cognitive test. Her financial reasoning is intact. Installing security systems after boundary violations is logical, not delusional. The courtroom fell silent. As Judge Albright adjourned for the day, I felt my lungs expand for the first time in weeks. Mason wouldn't look at me. Lila gathered her purse with jerky hands. For the first time, I believed I could win. The courthouse buzzed with whispers the next morning. I sat straighter than I had in years. My hands folded tight around a small cross from Robert's things. Daniel leaned over and whispered, "Remember, the burden of proof is theirs. All we need is clarity." Judge Albright entered, adjusting his glasses as the room fell silent. He spoke slowly, every word measured. "After reviewing all testimony and evidence, this court finds no indication that Mrs. Ruth Whitaker is incompetent. Medical evaluation shows her mental capacity to be intact. Financial records indicate her decisions, though unwelcome to her son and daughter-in-law, are rational. The petition for guardianship is hereby denied." For a heartbeat the air seemed to freeze. Then relief surged through me like a river breaking a dam. The judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, this court acknowledges evidence of undue pressure placed upon Mrs. Whitaker. Petitioners are warned that future attempts of harassment or unauthorized access to her property may result in legal consequences. He set down his gavel with a heavy finality. Mason shifted in his chair, jaw tight. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Lila shot me a glare so sharp it could cut glass. Caldwell closed his briefcase with the politeness of a man used to losing gracefully. But the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. When we walked into the hallway, Daniel placed a hand on my arm. "You won, Ruth. You're free." I nodded, though my heart was heavy. Winning didn't erase the truth. My own son had stood in front of strangers and tried to strip me of dignity for money. Hattie was waiting by the doors, a hand-knit shawl draped around her shoulders. She hugged me, whispering, "Told you, honey. They couldn't take what's already strong inside you." That night, I sat on my porch swing, the Kentucky twilight fading into deep blue. The crickets sang in the grass, and for the first time in years, the quiet felt peaceful, not lonely. I had my ledger of numbers, my lawyer's protective order, and a bank account that belonged only to me. But more than that, I had a spine I thought I'd lost. The next morning, I took small steps toward reclaiming myself. I called the locksmith again and asked for a personal panic pendant. I opened a new savings account earmarked for travel, not emergencies that weren't mine. I even drove into town to sell the pale pink dress at a consignment shop. The clerk handed me $60 cash. Instead of feeling bitter, I smiled. That dress would finally belong to someone who wanted it. I walked next door to the arts center and signed up for a watercolor class. That evening, I brewed sweet tea and sipped it slowly on the porch. Fireflies blinked across the yard. Mason's threats no longer circled in my head. The silence, at last, was my own. For the first time in decades, I slept through the night without waking to worry about someone else's bills. 3 months passed like the slow turn of seasons. Each day felt lighter. Mason and Lila no longer darkened my doorstep. From whispers around town, I heard they'd moved to a cramped apartment on the edge of Owensboro. Mason found odd work fixing fences at a horse farm. Lila started reselling used clothes online. Not for image this time, but for rent money. I didn't celebrate their struggle, but I didn't grieve it either. For once, their lives weren't tethered to mine. My own world bloomed. Tuesdays I went to watercolor class at the Arts Center, where my brush trembled less with each stroke. Thursdays I met Hattie at the church basement for potluck, bringing casseroles I had once been too tired to cook. Saturdays I walked the farmer's market, filling my basket with tomatoes and bread still warm from the oven. At the Henderson Historical Society, I volunteered 2 afternoons a week, cataloging old land deeds and handwritten wills. Touching those brittle pages, I thought of my own story, how paper could either be a weapon in greedy hands or a shield in careful ones. Daniel called one morning with final news. The police traced that bank breach attempt back to a device at Lila's sister's house. They closed the case after a formal apology letter was filed. He asked if I wanted to pursue charges. I shook my head, though he couldn't see it. No. The apology is enough. Let them live with the shame. I tucked the letter into my filing cabinet beside Drive. Monroe's report and the judge's ruling. Together they were more than papers. They were proof that I had fought. And I had won. One late afternoon, I brewed tea and sat on my porch swing. The Kentucky sky was painted with streaks of pink and gold. A neighbor's child waved from across the street, and I waved back, smiling. I thought about Robert. About the years I had poured everything into Mason. About the moment Lila said special people and how those words had cut like glass. But now, sitting in the calm glow of sunset, I realized something. Being excluded from their wedding wasn't a loss. It was a beginning. It was the day I stopped confusing love with obligation. I whispered the lesson aloud, wanting the air itself to carry it. Love that has to be bought isn't love. Peace that depends on silence isn't peace. Boundaries aren't cruelty, they're instructions. Teaching others how to treat you with respect. That night I wrote it in my journal. Choose yourself early. Choose yourself kindly. Choose yourself completely. As fireflies flickered across my yard, I closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for a call, or an apology, or a crisis. I was simply waiting for tomorrow. And that, I realized, was freedom. When I looked back, I realized the real betrayal wasn't being left out of a wedding. It was the years I let myself believe that money could buy me love or respect. My son and his wife taught me a bitter truth. If someone only shows up when your wallet is open, they are not family. They are customers. The day I stopped paying was the day I started living. It took courage to cancel the transfers, to face them in court, and to choose silence over manipulation. But in that choice I found freedom. The lesson is simple but powerful. Love that demands payment is not love at all. And boundaries are not selfish, they are survival. We each owe it to ourselves to protect our dignity. True family is proven in presence, not in price. And peace, once claimed, is worth more than any inheritance.